I'm Nate Pritts. I live in Syracuse, New York. I grew up there. I live there now. I teach for a 2-year school, working mostly like teaching web development, web design, and business writing.
I'm Matt Hart. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio. I grew up in Indiana, actually, but I teach at an art college in Cincinnati called the Art Academy of Cincinnati. I've been to Iowa City a couple times. I read at Prairie Lights in 2007 when my first book came out. And I was here this summer, actually, as part of a program that was run by the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa. So I feel like I've spent a lot of time in Iowa City, but really, I haven't spent that much time in Iowa City.
And I've never been here before at all. We're both here tonight just really for the reading. We talked to Jan about coming in, and she was excited about the idea of us reading with Dobby. We're all really good friends, and so she thought it would be a really great pairing, or tripling, for us to all be together. So this is my first time here. I'm really, really enjoying it. I mean, it's funny, I was actually just interviewed a couple nights ago at a reading, and a really common question that I get from people is, how do I deal with writer's block? And my answer to that question is that I've never really had writer's block. I've had times when I don't write, but there are always really clear reasons for that, but I've never actually had writer's block. So I feel like my answers are completely unsatisfactory to people who want to commiserate about reasons why they're not writing, or if they want tips and things. I mean, I've always just kind of written as often as I can and whenever I can, and so that's the only answer I can ever give anybody when they ask me anything.
The writer's block question, I mean, I don't have writer's block either. I totally agree with Nate. That, writer's block, and we were talking about this the other night, privileges the product over the process, and we're both totally process-oriented wackos. I mean, give me a set of parameters, give me a time limit, I'm ready.
And a pen.
Yeah, a pen. I mean, write anytime, anywhere, and most of the time it's crap, but I trust the process. I know that if I stick to working through the process, that eventually I get somewhere. One of the other questions I've been asked several times, especially when I've read in university settings, is why do you want your poems to be so difficult? And the answer...
Yeah, I want to know the answer to that too. Why are your poems so difficult?
My poems are so difficult because, we expect a lot from our poets.
Huh.
So I expect a lot from my readers. But my poems aren't really difficult at all. And I don't know. I've only been asked that question a couple of times.
I don't have an immediate answer to that. I mean, I think, I'll speak for myself, but I think it's safe to say that you're the same way. I mean, we read constantly. I think that's one thing that's really important to a writer, is to be reading constantly. And so at any given moment, there's a work that's really important to me, but it changes the next day when I start reading something else. I mean, I just read Lynn Hygenian's book, The Fatalist, and it was really amazing. And then I finished it, and the next morning I woke up and I started reading Ted Berrigan's letters to Sandy Berrigan that Coffee House Press just put out, and those are really important and amazing to me. And then, tomorrow I'll start reading something else. So part of the answer to your question is that whatever I'm currently reading, I wring it as much as I can to get everything out of it. But then there are main texts that I go back to and read constantly. I mean, I read The Catcher in the Rye probably once a year. It's a novel that's really important to me. I read John Berryman's work and S.T. Coleridge's work as much as I can to try to get as much out of those too. So there are things I return to, but whatever I'm currently reading, I try to get everything out of it that I can.
Yeah, and sort of dovetailing off that, I mean, the thing that is super exciting to me, when I'm reading, is when something that I'm reading makes me want to throw it down and start writing. And I'm constantly looking for, in the things that I read, in addition to just sort of trying to appreciate them for what they are, I'm also looking for strategies. I'm looking for new ways of approaching something that I do over and over again, or a new way of doing something I've never done before. And I've been obsessed with he was a poet originally, or when he started out, and then later a fiction writer, Roberto Bolaño. So I've been reading The Savage Detectives and 2666 over and over again, which are these crazy novels that reinvent the form in certain ways. I mean, it's totally amazing work, but I'm finding a lot of inspiration in Bolaño these days. So. For you, it's leaves and clouds.
Yeah, I have a really clearly defined sort of image sphere that I go back to over and over again. And Matt's right, leaves and clouds and the sun. So
I gave you yours. What's mine?
But to say that I cut them is a little bit of an overstatement, simply because I'm aware of them and I employ them for a certain reason. I mean, I think there are tropes and ideas and images that are really important to me, and creating poems out of those I think is like the crucial project I'm engulfed in. I mean, it's like I'm over and over again making the same painting with the color green, but it's different every time. And so over and over again I'm writing poems with the same images, but it's a little bit different every time, and I'm finding out something new about myself and about the work. And eventually I'll move on, but for right now I don't necessarily revise those things out, I guess.
I think for me it's constant. Like when I sit down to write, oftentimes I don't have anything to write about at all. So I start out by describing like whatever's in front of me or whatever's around me. And also the direct address, where I'm addressing one particular reader, comes up over and over and over again in my poems, and sometimes it gets revised out and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, it's something that is with me all the time. So these like immediate description, direct address to a particular reader, those are things that come up for me again and again and again. That's funny. We were listening to Sonic Youth on the way here today in the car, and we were listening to the album Goo. And there's a song on that record called Mildred Pierce, and it starts out with this sort of theme and variation, and it kind of builds and builds as it goes. Very few lyrics. I mean, the only lyrics in it are just the words Mildred Pierce, the name Mildred Pierce. And then about 3/4 of the way through the song just explodes, and it's complete cacophony. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And I said to Nate, like, what is the linguistic equivalent of that song? Like, how could I write a poem that has this sort of repetition, this theme and variation that builds and builds and builds, but then just like flips its gourd, like goes completely haywire, insane, so that people felt like the building was exploding? That's what I want to include in my poems, and I haven't figured out how to do that yet.
But he'll do it tomorrow. So, like, I don't know if I have an answer to that question, because usually as soon as I think of something that I want to include in the poem, I do in the next one. It's like a constant process of solving problems. I mean, what he just presented was an aesthetic problem, a problem that he's going to solve through poetry, and I feel like that's constantly what it is. So I'm on an almost daily basis coming up against things that I think, how could this be in a poem? How can I do this? And then that's the next thing I do, and then something new comes up. So there's not like a long-standing list for me. It's just constant crossing things off and trying new things. Anybody who says they are, I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
that's probably not right.
I don't really have a response to that. I don't think. I mean, I think in the last 50 to 100 years, questions of like essential nature, or like how we define things, have become a lot less important than, like, given that you say so and so is a writer, why does that matter? So like questions of value trump questions of definition over and over again. I always kind of feel like the questions of value are the ones that I'm like sort of most interested in, and I'm totally willing to go with anything. If somebody, I mean, if somebody told me that like this calendar was a writer, I would be like, okay, great, it's a writer. Why does that matter?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I was kind of joking, but I think really what I said is the truth for me. Like anybody could be a writer, anybody is a writer, but that's not what's important. What happens after that, when they begin to justify it, is what I'm really interested in. So anybody is a writer, but then like, what are you writing? That's what I'm more concerned about, and then we assess that.
And that's a constant question we ask ourselves too. Like,
Right.
if I'm writing, like, why does this matter? Like, is this significant? Does this matter?
Right.
Like, why am I doing this? And every day is like a new, attempt at trying to answer that question.